Hello everyone. Welcome again to the new episode of IDRiM podcast. Here today we are accompanied with my one of the colleagues that I have during my time in Kyoto University. Which is her name is Maria Florderisa del Castillo, or we can call her Liz. Uh, so she is graduated from Kyoto University just this year, and especially from the Tatano Lab, as we already did a podcast with the Professor Tatano as a few episodes back. And today we will explore about her research in Japan, especially in her during her PhD, which called the title is Multi-scale economic impact estimation of disasters based on electricity consumption and nighttime light data. So Liz, how are you today?
I'm fine. It's nice to see you again and to meet Ashley, Mark, and to be here. It's a bit of I mean, I'm a bit nervous about this, but um, let's see. I want to share my research and talk about our experiences in Japan. I'm quite excited to maybe a bit nervous and excited.
Sure. It's nice to have you here. So let me give you the first questions, which is a very simple one. Can you briefly introduce your research to our listener in plain language, in the language that easy to digest for us? As I already mentioned the title.
Yeah. So our research is about estimating economic impacts of disasters. So for this, I used electricity consumption and nighttime light data. So during disasters, disaster managers or emergency managers, they need to know the magnitude of the impacts. They would like to know where the impacts are most severe. So our research contributes to that. We want to generate the information of how much the impact was incurred due to the disaster and which parts use the electricity consumption to estimate impacts and to map out the location of the most affected areas using the nighttime light data. This will serve as a guide to the disaster managers, and so that they can provide financial support to the most affected communities. Yeah.
Okay, so thinking about your research, what motivated you to explore the economic impact of disasters using electricity consumption and nighttime light data?
Yeah, so the motivation is we talked about this at the start of our research. So we based on our literature review, so we noticed some gaps. So research gaps. So we call this the spatiotemporal blindness, and we noticed that the available data sets like available data sets for disaster impacts like surveys or questionnaires, economic data sets are not do not match the scales of the disasters. We call them the temporal and spatial scale, so across the space and time. So those data sets do not match, so we call them the spatiotemporal blindness. And we found some solutions to this. I think at that time, one of our lab mates was working on the electricity consumption data, and so the idea came was used from Matsumoto-san. So he was working on electricity consumption in Japan, and so we also tried to use that data for the Philippines. And in addition to the electricity consumption data, we added the nighttime light data to fill in the spatial aspect of the research. Because electricity consumption data that they were using at the time was so expensive, and that scale of data was not available in the Philippines. So it was complemented by the nighttime light data set. Yeah, so that was the motivation to fill in the spatial and the temporal gaps in the data and the estimates, economic impact estimates.
Well, that was interesting. Then you, in the motivation, you explain about the gaps that you explore, especially about the spatiotemporal blindness in the traditional economic impact estimations, where it doesn't scale up when using the method, and you found the solutions using this electricity consumption data and nighttime data. Well, this kind of solutions, can you give perhaps more elaborations, the reliability of this? How reliable this compared to the previous one? Especially that you mentioned this actually can solve the discrepancy in the previous methods. Is it reliable enough that we can rely on it when we estimating the economic impact of disaster, or there maybe perhaps need some adjustment again in the future?
Yes. So to know the reliability of the results, what we did was so we estimated the economic activities first using electricity consumption and nighttime light data, and we regressed GDP as an indicator of economic activity on those parameters, on the electricity consumption and nighttime light data. So the regression results showed that the electricity consumption can estimate the economic activity in terms of GDP very well. And our results showed R squared value of 0.998 for the model of a GDP based on electricity consumption. For the model based on nighttime light data, the R squared was lower, so 0.869, but still it is reliable based on the results of these statistical tests. This is based on the national quarterly GDP, electricity consumption, and nighttime light data. The strengths of the electricity consumption and nighttime light data are on the spatial and temporal details. So specifically, electricity consumption has a more temporally detailed data. So usually we can get the electricity consumption data the daily interval or hourly interval. Some are also available at the hourly because they need to monitor the energy demands and the energy supply. So we can come up with the electricity consumption data at the hourly data. And the nighttime light data is available daily, and the resolution of the nighttime light data is around 500 meters. Now, when it comes to the nighttime light data, the problem that we are having are the cloud covers. So if we have the clouds, then or other atmospheric particles, ashfall covering the ground, so it obstructs the detection of nighttime light from the ground by the satellite sensors, and that can affect the accuracy of the nighttime light data. That is why the R squared of the model based on the nighttime light data is lower than that of the electricity consumption data. But overall, we could say that they are reliable enough to give us an indication of how much and where the impacts are. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I noticed when I was reading your PhD document that you picked two case studies in particular to look at, and that one was COVID-19, and the other was is it Taal Volcano eruption. So why did you pick those two case studies?
Because my thesis wants to look at the disasters at differing scales. Because as I've mentioned, the about spatial temporal blindness. So the data sets have covered different spatial and temporal scales. So when I say temporal scales, it's from it can be from daily to decadal, or yes, anywhere in between of those. And then for the spatial, we can have the community level, local level, up to the global scale. And so we picked the COVID-19 because it is a large scale hazard, and it can represent a large scale and long-term hazard, whereas the Taal Volcano eruption can represent the local scale short-term hazard. And if we can show that these methods and data sets can effectively estimate the impacts and map out the impacts, then it can suggest that the rest of the hazards in between can also be the impacts of those hazards in between can also be estimated using these methods and data sets. So filling in the gaps in the traditional data sets that are available.
Can you actually explain the Taal volcanic eruption? So I just realized when you were talking about it, that most of our audience probably don't know much about the Taal volcanic eruption. So, can you give us a bit more information about the location of the eruption and the scale of the eruption?
Yes, sure. The Taal volcano erupted on January 12, 2020. The Taal volcano is located at the southern region of Luzon Island. So the Philippines has three island groups. The northernmost island group was Luzon. So the Taal volcano is located at the southern portion of this island, and there's a lake formed around the crater, the main crater. And the most affected areas are within the 17-kilometer danger zone of the crater, so the estimated affected number of people is 700,000 people. So the Taal volcano had a pre-magmatic eruption, so it emitted ashfall that reached even the northern tip of the island. It spread northwards, and then so around the volcano, the thickness of the ashfall was around 3 centimeters, and covered agricultural areas, residential areas, built businesses and industries. The estimated cost by the government was estimated losses by the government was 8.5 billion Philippine pesos. So the eruption occurred one major eruption on the day of January 12, but the succeeding days also experienced some eruptions, minor eruptions up to 10 days. The eruption was accompanied by other hazards like earthquakes, and maybe the earthquake lasted for up to two weeks. Yeah. So there were a lot of damaged roads. So some parts were uplifted and some parts were moved downwards. So the roads were broken, and the ashfall destroyed a lot of crops and also establishments, buildings, residences. Yeah. So that's the Taal Volcano eruption. The Taal Volcano erupted many times before. A lot of major eruptions. The last one was 1960s. The last one before this. But up to now, it is quite active, but not as it didn't have a major eruption as that of January 12, 2020.
So this, based on those two cases that you explored during your PhD and with the new method you propose in here, what is I think most interesting findings that you can share with us from those two disasters? As we know that the COVID is big, like it's affecting entire world, and based on your investigations using the method that you used, what is the findings that, oh, this is very interesting, and as well as it's compared with the Taal volcano as well? Can you share more with us about the finding you found?
Yeah, so yes, you are right. There are two types of hazards, and for the COVID-19, I think that the interesting finding would be the longer term impact assessment. In most of the studies, the temporal dimension is often overlooked, because probably the surveys were done once, and then the succeeding impacts were not captured in the in those surveys. So the use of electricity consumption and nighttime light enabled the continuous monitoring of the impacts, and based on that, we can assess to a certain level effectiveness of the response or policies that were implemented. So, for example, in the case of the COVID-19, we use the nighttime light data to estimate the 3-year impacts of the COVID-19 in the at the regional scale in the Philippines, and based on that, we can compare across regions, which regions are most affected, and when they were when they suffered the biggest loss, economic loss. And based on this, so we generated an index we call the Economic Activity Reduction Index. And based on that, we observed that the impacts across. So most of the time we measure the impacts in absolute terms. but that will give us more high. That would highlight the impacts on the highly urbanized areas. So we will focus on the response efforts on the highly urbanized areas and neglect the urbanizing ones. But in our research, we found that by using that index, the urbanizing regions are more affected than the highly urbanized areas in the long run. Because initially you would have the bulk of the impact in the urban regions, but in the long run, it was the overall the urbanizing regions that were more affected. Yeah, and so for the Taal volcano eruption, we also use the electricity consumption data to measure the impacts at the daily scale. So here we can see some indications of the correlation between the timing of the response and the movement of the people and the impacts. And for this, we can identify the most affected areas in the at the local level, yeah, by the Taal volcano eruption.
Okay, so what did the electricity consumption data tell you about the Taal volcano eruption that other data sources couldn't tell you?
Yes, so the electricity consumption data has temporal detail. So we can show the daily fluctuations in the economic impacts or the economic activity reductions. Particularly on the first day, one day after the eruption, we saw a spike in economic impacts, and that was concurrent with the power outages. So the power distributors reported that the energy consumption dropped on that day, and it can be due to several factors. One is that the people evacuated, and another is that the power service providers cut the energy supply. And also, so after 6 days, after 6 days, the power was restored, and the energy consumption loss dropped. So the losses dropped on the day that the power was restored, and it peaked again because of the increase in earthquake occurrences. So 2 weeks later, the area experienced a lot of earthquakes, and there were road closures due to road damages and people evacuated. So the economic losses increased again. And then on the end of the second week, the assistance were distributed to the communities, and we saw a steep drop in the economic losses on those days when they provided assistance. So it showed that quick assistance distribution can reduce the economic losses.
Okay, so that's interesting to know, especially about the eruptions. I want to return back again with your explanations about the interesting finding that you found, which is okay. You found that's actually the one who affected the most is the urbanizing one, the one that it's still growing, the regions that's still growing compared to the built, the already
Yeah.
grown the regions. And as you mentioned lately, just now, that's like the quick assistance actually can help to reduce the loss, right? uh do you have any data or maybe some further analysis whether the assistance that the government give already targeting those urbanizing areas first, or it's just like only for the urbanized places first? Which one that you found?
Actually, I think there is some data about. Wait, first, the urbanizing and urbanizing and urbanized regions. The result on that is for the COVID-19. Uh, this one for the assistance, I only have it for the Taal Volcano. But for COVID-19, probably the lockdowns, we can look at the lockdowns. So which areas were placed under strict lockdowns and the effect of that on the regions, specifically on urbanized and urbanizing regions. So I haven't performed further analysis on this, but I think that can be done. And now for the Taal Volcano, the assistance distribution, I think the data about the distribution, where these relief or where these aid go were reported. But since my electricity consumption data is at the computed for the whole region, uh, I I cannot use this, but I can use the daily nighttime light data, which can be processed. I still need to process the daily if the clouds are not obscuring the area. So I can compare the daily nighttime light change with the data on where the aid were distributed. Yeah, still have to do that.
No, no worries. I was just like I'm just curious that because like you
Um,
mentioned about the one that affected the most is actually this part compared to previously reported, and that whether there is already an effort actually targeting the one that you're finding now. Because like you mentioned about that, can you explain more about how the government can, or any emergency agencies can use your research in the future disaster response as efforts?
oh, well, number one, the maps can be used to aid the recovery plans. If, for example, uh, the municipalities are consistently affected by the volcanic eruption, then they should avoid doing recovery efforts there. And um, well, for the since the COVID-19 is over, then maybe the results can be used for future other if in the future we have other types of health hazards. And oh, well, even the COVID-19 pandemic has ended, the impacts may still be felt on the regions, especially the urbanizing regions. So we can use this to serve as an evidence or uh, material for acquiring aid from government to help the urbanizing regions to recover from the pandemic. Uh, That's what I think it can be used for. Um, yeah, so two types. So one is hazard without physical damage, but has affected the economic growth of certain regions, and another one can be used to restore, reconstruct, and recover from a hazard that has physical damages.
Yeah, and actually, when we're thinking about energy consumption and we're thinking about economic output, and in particular COVID-19, this is not a question. This is a point of view that I can see from the UK, is that the pandemic in the UK actually did change. Actually, because in the UK, we work more from home, and actually, what it did was actually increase the economic output in rural areas, because what had happened is that people started to move to more rural areas where basically if you work from home, you don't have to travel in. And actually, what I've noticed in the UK is that there has been a noticeable economic reduction that is more permanent because of the pandemic. Because if people are not commuting in, that means people are not, the local, shops that, would sell, sandwiches during the day. They're not now doing any business because people are not working as much. So actually, I was just putting out there as a point that actually I think that we can see that sometimes, where you said that some urban areas, when they were coming back after the pandemic, there were some long lasting changes, and in the UK it's the same thing, where we have definitely seen a slight shift towards a more rural economy, away from an urban. So that's just the point. Harris, do you have any questions?
Oh, can I say
Yeah.
a clarification about that? I was not able to mention that. Of course, I think we also observed that the movement. There was an urban exodus, moving to from the urban regions to the rural regions, and so there was an initial drop in the economic activities in the urban regions. But I think the difference is that when they implemented the lockdowns in the urbanizing regions, it was longer because the lockdowns in the urban region was shorter. I guess because people were people are working in the urban regions. More people are working in the urban regions, so they want to normalize the situation there more. But in the rural regions, in the urbanizing regions, the lockdowns were maintained even though the cases were low.
I just want to jump into this discussion between how the COVID impacts actually on the economic activities. Actually, also according to Liz, Indonesia also like that. But although it's like as you mentioned, Mark, that we also see in the trend that some people in urban regions, because of the work from home or work from anywhere forcing from the government, the increasing in the rural area, it's not really felt because most of the first, especially in Southeast Asian country, I guess most of the people who live in the rural areas actually relies on the outside. I mean, on the works, on the job that require you to go outside mostly. So that's why, like, the as Liz mentions, once the lockdown mechanism is already implemented, they actually lost the job and they cannot have economic output anymore. Well, the exodus from the people who live in urban area to the rural areas did not really help, because it's actually they work from them, and then the money actually flows to the companies that located in the urban areas. And as let's mention also, the in the urban areas usually well equipped with the digital technologies, which the rural areas doesn't have. That therefore the lockdowns is actually having a shorter time in urban areas than the in the rural areas, which is like, okay, you don't have the digital technology yet, then you cannot really lift up the lockdown forced from the government. But this is interesting discussion, especially with the as you mentioned, Luis, that this actually still the impact is still felt in the Philippines until now, right? As after five 2 years. When was the last lockdown in Philippines?
Oh, but the last lockdown was 2020. My data is only up to 2022. I
Okay.
don't know the last lockdown, but maybe 2022. Yeah.
So I think it's 3 years after that and still felt. I mean, what kind of impacts actually still felt until today? Do you have any insight on that?
Oh, well, it's recovering now. The maybe practically all the places are recovering, but maybe the how do you say, the stagnation in
Mhm.
the economic development of some regions, education, or um, how do you say, the educational development. Pretty much the everything is normal now. Um, it's just that the I guess the overall how do you say? Because if you look at the counterfactual, maybe we are near the normal. We are
Mhm.
almost normal like that. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So I guess like the people still arrange their life again back to normal. But I mean like that kind of thing is also still felt in many countries. Now, since you do interesting research, do you find any challenges or obstacles when doing this during your time in Japan? Is there any difficulties you face when you do this research?
Oh, well, the primary difficulty was getting the data, data collection. Maybe, and also because electricity consumption at the large scale is available. The local level electricity consumption is not always complete or not always available. So that is one of the challenge. Um, and also for me, learning a new field, which is economics or econometrics, is also one of the challenge, but one of the rewarding challenge that I face, because my background is not on economics, and I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to uh, doing economic estimation. But it was interesting, I think. It was a very exciting time for me to learn how to use programming tools like R, or computing tools like R, and uh, experiment with various econometric models. So yeah, so that's a challenge with data gathering and data processing. Yeah, mostly data gathering.
Yeah, and Harris, when you were doing your PhD, because I know you were in the same department as well,
Yes.
did you have to? Was there anything that you had to learn in particular, like a new type of area that you never really explored?
Oh,
Whether it be in technique or
yeah.
subject matter.
Yeah, of course, of course. Like, I mean, like, as I mentioned within our podcast episode that I need to learn about volcanology and meteorology, and the combination of that, of course, as Liz mentioned as well, since our group was in disaster economics, we learned about some economics too, especially the economic impact assessment and all those things. But and the challenge that we felt at the time, like as PhD, we need to gather a lot of different knowledge, then we accumulate those knowledge into what we are right now. So it's one of challenging and the fun part, right? It's challenging, but yeah, we got the fun part. But although, like, sometimes, like, it was so stressful. I mean, like, as we age, our capability to learning time is decreasing. So that's why, like, we need, okay, I should keep going with the research, but I still stuck in this learning, this baby steps. But how about your case, Mark? I mean, like, what kind of a challenge you face during your postgraduate studies?
For me, it was probably the two biggest things was the scale of data collection for me. So I did two national surveys, one of which was nearly 2,000 people. So that scale of having to gather that much data, but also, as with both yourselves, learn a completely new topic. So for me, I am by trait, I'm a physical geographer. So I very much dealt with the mechanics of climate change and but as with my PhD, it was very much about human perception and how humans interact with the environment. And I had to learn basically all about psychology. Literally, the first year to 2 years was just a crash course on psychology of of how people think. And this is a thing for anyone who's thinking of doing a PhD. Just what you think you're going to end up doing, and then what you end up doing is something completely different. You have to learn a whole new topic usually that you don't expect that you're going to go down.
Yeah, that's usually the case. Like, okay, what we envisions in the beginning of we starting our journey in PhD, like, we completely almost throw it all away when we reach third or fourth year. And okay, this is something new that we explored during the journey. So what's the important is the journey itself, not the beginning. So well, should we do some last question, Mark, or you think that we can do some questions left?
Yeah, I've got a question here, which
Okay.
I think actually all three of us could think about this one. Is how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect your PhD journey? And I don't just mean as as a subject matter. I know you've talked about PhD in your research, but actually as a researcher, because COVID-19 was such a unique period of time, and a lot of the current generation are not going to have that experience of having to literally research in a pandemic. And also our supervisors in the same way, in a weird way, because for them, they'd never experienced anything like that. So I'm actually intrigued in this setting, how did the pandemic really change us as a researcher?
Yeah, that's right. I think the pandemic was a really unique and unexpected uh, experience. Number one, life living in Japan, entering Japan was very difficult at the time. When I started my PhD, I had to move my start because the borders were locked. And when I arrived in Japan, I had to quarantine for two weeks, and also a lot of activities were canceled. So it was isolating. That's good if you are comfortable living by yourself and very independent, it's good. But if you are the type of person who needs connection, needs to make a connection constantly, and needs to communicate with people in person, that's very challenging for me. It was a challenge meeting people. It was a challenge uh, uh, being living normally, living like how we lived before the pandemic. And yeah, so I felt isolated sometimes when I started my PhD, especially during the initial months when the protocols are still strict. And also, it presented a challenge in data collection. Uh, I have to collect data from the Philippines, and I'm in another country. And I understand that maybe the agencies were also operating remotely, so maybe the communication is not uh, handled as efficiently if there's no pandemic. So yeah, there isolation and probably the communication is very difficult. Yeah. But it also presented an opportunity for me to do the to do the research. I mean, the pandemic gave me a large scale, long term hazard to study.
Well, I can relate with the isolations during the pandemic because it's very hard that at the time also like uh after 2 years in Japan, like it's supposed to be my parents should have come, but they cannot because of it's the beginning of the pandemic. So it's difficult, and I want let's say I wanted to go home, and also it's difficult. You know, as you mentioned, the strict border controls. Although it doesn't really well, if I think back again, it doesn't really affect my research because I do everything in the inside my home, and I just like do simulations, all those analysis, which is didn't require a lot of travel around to gather data, but still, since it's very isolated and like you cannot have much discussions one to one, person to persons that you should really have when you meeting directly. It's still maybe affect the way I shape my research, right? When if you can meet some expert in the beginning of your research, and they give you insight, okay, this perhaps will be easier. But yeah, that's what I thought. But the at the time it was also beneficial for me because like in Japan, a lot of discount for the COVID because they try to revitalize the economics. They give a lot of discount for the foreign students, especially traveling across Japan. That perhaps in the normal circumstances, that kind of discount is not exist anymore. So yeah, that's somehow it's just like the benefit in the hindsight that the COVID happens and like give us the opportunity either for research or to give some enjoyment to our life. But I guess if we offered to have this opportunity again, probably I will say no. Because like that's it's big and it's impacted entire layer of society. So yeah, the best way is always like this kind of things never happen again in the future, of course.
Yeah, and for me it was a bit of a very different because I was actually in a different stage probably of research compared to both of you. So I was actually writing up at the time of the lockdowns. So for me, it was kind of an ideal situation where I could literally just not travel. So before the pandemic, my research, a lot of my time was spent. I would work 3 days from home and 2 days in the office, So I was already like a hybrid type person. And when I was in the office, I was expected to be teaching most of the time. So a lot of my I actually was quite isolated already from my colleagues. Plus, my research department was small. So I was the only person at the time, just before the lockdown, up until early 2020, I was the only person in my department who was studying anything related to disasters at all in a PhD setting. So I was quite isolated. I had all the physical geographers, or all the pure human geographers. So I was kind of like somewhere in the middle, which didn't really fit any place. So I was quite isolated. And what I found for me is actually the lockdowns provided a great opportunity to communicate with people. So actually, it was the inverse compared to everyone else, because everyone else was online. We had to do stuff online. So I got to participate in more conferences because they went online. I got to communicate with people I would never normally do. IDRiM, I never really. I tried to attend conferences with IDRiM before the pandemic, but for various reasons, I couldn't either afford to go, or I just didn't have the schedule because I was doing so much teaching. But because of the flexibility of online, actually, for me, it was more beneficial because I then could, participate. And actually, I find that a lot of the ways from the pandemic of working, I still carry on today. So I will go to Newcastle, where my office is located, maybe 2 or 3 times a quarter, if that. Especially if I'm not teaching. If I'm not teaching, I pretty much won't be there. And that's, for me, I just held on to that element. A lot of my work now is more office, home base, where I can literally just jump out my bed and within 30 seconds start to work. And I find it more convenient.
So yeah, it's a very different world we experience it. But I mean, like, yeah, it's nice to have. I think one thing to take back is like actually in the built environment, it's nice to have the system now where it's very hybrid. Where I'm in Sweden also, that I got 1 week at least, 1 day to have work from home, not really come to the university, although it's very close to my home, the university. But yeah, it's nice that like it somehow give the opportunity for work to be done in such way, and like to present the infrastructures more accommodating for people to come and go, not really rely so much on the coming to the office anymore. So thank you very much, Liz, of coming today in the podcast. It was a very nice discussion with you, and hopefully you can enjoy your life more in the Philippines after few years in Japan. I believe that you have some very much looking forward to explore your country again. So before we close this podcast, do you have anything to say to our listener, especially the one who will do their PhD or perhaps in the middle of their PhD journey?
Ah, yeah, if interested in doing PhD, be prepared. Be prepared of mentally, emotionally, physically. Yeah, also it's a good opportunity, but you have to also take care, uh, balance the work and life. We need to take care also of our health, physical health, and also maybe uh, um, if you are starting with your PhD, it's good to establish good communication with especially with the supervisors, with the professors. It would be nice if you can establish a good understanding of the topics and express what you want to work on, and understand also what the professor wants to is interested on working. Yeah, so this thing is also important. If you're in the middle of your PhD, maybe uh, uh, be uh, organized with your time. Maybe you have to plan your schedules very well, because especially when it comes to public publishing the papers, that's also one of the challenge in PhD, having the publications, because we cannot control the of the response coming from the publishers and from the reviewers. So maybe manage the time well. Yeah, that's it. And enjoy. I think it's important to enjoy the experience. If you're doing PhD in outside of your country, learn as much as you can about the language and the culture, the people, and yeah, enjoy and be courageous. Yeah.
Oh, that was encouraging words. So that's it, everyone, for this today's podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed, and see you next time.